Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are about to begin the 2030 to 2031 season with the Blackhawks. Expectations are once again high for our team. We've won 2 consecutive President trophies, and we're expected to be one of the Stanley Cup contenders this year. Unfortunately, in each of the past 2 seasons, we had relatively early playoff exits. The second round 2 seasons ago, and we got upended in the first round in the season that was just completed a few months ago. So hopefully more success with the team this year. It's possible that this will be the last year of this playthrough. We'll see how the season goes. We'll see how viewership goes. This starts our 9th season as general manager of the Blackhawks. We've had 5 playoff appearances and 1 championship. Clearly would love to add to that total this season. And let's get things underway and see if we can do some damage here in the early stages of the 2030 to 2031 NHL season. And we're getting ready for the opening face-off on opening night. And unfortunately, Quinton Byfield still banged up with an elbow contusion. He's game available, but only at about 80% fitness. So taking a look at our schedule for the month, we've got a day off until our home opener against Colorado, hoping maybe he'll be back for that. If not, certainly would think he'll make his debut at home against Minnesota on Monday. Pretty even split of home and road games this month. Looks like we've got 5 at home and 6 on the road as we try to get the season off to a good start here in October. And unfortunately, we've lost our first 2 games of the year, but things still going better for us than they are for our former defenseman, Rasmus Andersson. You can see he was just waived by San Jose. And he's on pace to be minus 205 this season in terms of his plus minus, which would certainly, if he were to play 82 games, which he is doubtful to since he's about to be waived, would be some kind of a record on the negative side. And it's been a pretty ugly start to the season for the Blackhawks. 4-7 record here as we finished up the month of October. Take a look at the development report quickly, and Roy Chung and Simon Nemec, a couple of defensemen getting better. Right winger Matthias Laferriere getting weaker in terms of his stick checking ability. Otherwise, most of the development with players that we have the rights to or players in our minor league system. Still selling a lot of jerseys with 5, I'll make that 6 of the top 11 selling jerseys, including new addition Isaac Rosen, who's been pretty popular so far and one of the few highlights for our team. You can see he's got 11 assists on the year to go with his 5 goals, so 16 points in his first 10 games. The team's been pretty productive offensively, but the goaltending has definitely not been as good as it has been in previous seasons. That could obviously be goaltending, could be defense, could be some combination of the above. Did get some good suggestions, or at least interesting suggestions to think about following our last episode from 3/4 Badger, who suggested that given that both Wallstedt and Svedabak are pretty good goalies, and we're in the last year of Wallstedt at a big number, and Wallstedt is also looking for an even bigger number of over $8 million a year starting next year. And that we also have one other really big-time player, Quinton Byfield, as a coming free agent. And Byfield happens to be looking for over $9.5 million a year. That perhaps it's going to be time to consider moving on from Mr. Wallstedt as our starting goalie and turning the job over to Svedabak, perhaps trading Wallstedt this season for someone who can help, and using the money that we wouldn't be reinvesting in Wallstedt next year to ensure that we're able to keep Byfield on the team next year. So that's obviously something that we're going to have to give some thought to, and depending on how this season goes, maybe even make a mid-season trade. Thus far, Svedabak has not been good. 1-3 record with a 407 goals against and an 876 save percentage. Wallstedt's been a little better, 3-4 record with a 351 goals against and an 894 save percentage. But certainly hoping for more from both of those players. Taking a look more broadly at our team, obviously Wallstedt and Svedabak are the top two goalies in our organization. Have had for the last few years Ryerson Leanders down in the AHL. I think he's at a point in his career where he could certainly be a competent backup goalie if we did move on from Mr. Wallstedt. And then further down in the organization, we've got Tyler Goodfellow in the ECHL, as well as Oskari Sarvirta, who we have playing back home for this season. But the 22-year-old is potentially a prospect for us down the line. So feel that with Leanders, we do have someone who would be a competent NHL backup goalie. Definitely would not want to be playing him as the starter for any extended period of time. So we'll see how things go over the next month or two before feeling a ton of urgency in terms of making some potential trades. But obviously the hope and the expectation is that this team starts to play better here in the month of November. Check in quickly on team harmony. Still a really good locker room at this point. Job security has taken a little bit of a hit with the poor start to the season for us with that 4-7 record. And not surprisingly, after the 4-7 start, not getting a glowing evaluation from owner Rocky Wirtz. Very disappointed for our performance. Expecting a championship, but it looks like we're no longer the best bet to win one. Recognizes that we are a serious contender, though, and can look for players to help us right now. Expects us to contend against next year. Fans still pleased with us, and no need to worry about our job, despite the slow start to the year. And the season is quickly turning around for the Blackhawks here in November. You can see we've won all 6 of our games, including 5 of them that happen to be on the road. So now over the second half of the month, where we're going to have 5 of 7 games at home, the hope is that we can really make some progress in the standings after doing so well on the road. We've gotten the record up to 10-7, tied with Nashville and the Wild for the lead in the Central Division now, but those two teams both have 2 games in hand on us right now. So although we're certainly playing better and we've started to turn the season around, by no means has been as dominant a season as we were perhaps hoping to have with the Blackhawks this year. And the month of November continues to go incredibly for the Blackhawks on the ice. We were 4-7 when the month started. As you can see, that means we are 11-0-1 during this month of November so far. Moved up to first place in the standings in the Central Division, and with 31 points, we rank on top of the Western Conference, although we do still have multiple games in hand against several of the teams that are close to us in the standings. Rosen continues to have a real nice year, 20 assists and 30 points on the year, both showing up on the leaderboards. Getting a little banged up at the blue line right now. Xavier Veyu's been out for over a week now with a gluteus strain. He's day-to-day at this point. Unfortunately, Quinn Hughes has a hyperextended ankle, and Sam Rinzel his wrist soreness. So they're both going to be going on the IL also. So going to be looking to the AHL for some help on our defensive lines. I have to bring up 2 players for the near term, and then hopefully we'll have Vayu back soon. And Carter Kowalik, the youngster, has been up with us for the past week or so, although he hasn't got any action yet, but he will certainly be getting into the lineup in our next game in all likelihood. Well, we ended up winning our final game of the month of November, so as we talked about, an incredible month for the Blackhawks, a 12-0-1 record. The lone loss was that overtime loss at home to Dallas about a week and a half ago. So really good performance on the ice, obviously, which has pushed the Blackhawks to tied with the Kraken and the Ducks for the best record in the Western Conference. You can see Rosen still on the leaderboard for assists and points. And Jesper Wallstedt really has turned his season around. He started the vast majority of the games on that long winning streak for us. Stands at a 14-4-1 record at this point, 264 goals against and a 918 save percentage on the year. So things going well for him as goaltender right now. Looking at our development report, hopefully a little more positive. Linus Eriksson, the youngster Kowalik, and Simon Nemec with development at the NHL level. And Dylan Larkin, the veteran, continues to regress a bit in terms of his physical skills, but he's still having a productive year for us. Has played 22 of our games with 14 goals and 11 assists, 25 points. Ice time down a little bit as he is clearly a second-line center for us this year at this point. And he's been very productive when he has had that ice time, though. Hopefully he can remain healthy for the rest of the year and continue to be a very productive offensive player for us. And it is getting insane how popular the Blackhawks have become. You can see we've got the top 5 selling jerseys in the entire league with Rosen, Johnson, Hughes, Byfield, and Larkin. Wallstedt, Will Shields, and Victor Eklund also on the list. So 8 of the top 16 selling jerseys are Chicago Blackhawks, although we have not been able to win a Stanley Cup in several seasons at this point. The fans are still very supportive of what the Blackhawks are trying to do on the ice. And I had mentioned earlier how important Wallstedt was to our great performance in November. Perhaps not surprisingly, he was just named Goalie of the Month for the National Hockey League. And we've made it to the end of December and New Year 2031. December was not as incredible as November was for the Blackhawks, but still an excellent month. You can see we stand at 27-11-1 here as the new year begins, about halfway through the season. Kent Johnson was just named the Player of the Month. He had 4 assists in an incredible 11-0 rout of Vegas to close out the calendar year of 2030. You can see even with 4 assists with the nice performance by Wallstedt, Rosen, and Rinzel that the Player of the Month Johnson wasn't even one of the 3 stars for that incredible offensive outburst by Chicago. Looking at our development over the month of December, Adam Jecko improving among our NHL players. Other than that, all the improvement was with the real youngsters throughout our system. Turning to the overall standings as we close in on the midway point here, not quite to the President's Trophy level that we've been at the past 2 years, but our 55 points through 39 games is second best in the NHL behind only the Red Wings. Our 27 wins is the most in the Western Conference and actually the most in hockey since the Red Wings have picked up a bunch of points through overtime losses. You can see that offensively we've got some players on the leaderboards. Rosen and Kent Johnson both up there in points. Johnson with 23 goals and Rosen with 31 assists, both among the top handful of players in those categories. And Jesper Wallstedt, who we had been talking about earlier, is maybe someone we'd move on from. Might happen at the end of this year, but it's going to be hard given our aspirations of winning it all to move on from him, because he is having a excellent year. 23-7-1 with a 242 goals against and a 922 save percentage. And although on paper Svedabak sometimes looks just as good, definitely has not been this year. 3-4 with a 323 goals against and a 90% save percentage. Taking a little bit of a deeper look at the standings makes me feel even better about where we are, although, as I mentioned, Detroit is ahead of us in the race for the President's Trophy. Our plus 57 goal differential is by far the best in hockey, even 13 goals better than Detroit is at this point. Looking just at the Western Conference, our 163 goals scored is the best in the conference, and our 106 goals against looks like it's fourth in the conference. So the goaltending after that slow start has gotten much better. You can see we've won 6 in a row. Team harmony remains excellent. No conflicts, no cliques, no real problems in the locker room. And our job security, obviously, with the great play that we've had over the last couple of months, is very high. Fan happiness also off the charts, so to speak, although it doesn't actually let you go off the charts, but it's at its peak of 100 here. So the season is going really well for the Blackhawks, and before we finish up the episode, we'll check in on the actual stats of our offensive players after checking in on the goalies. And as we talked about, with less than half the season played, 39 games and 163 goals scored, we're scoring over four goals a game. And you can see we've got 5 players who are averaging over a point a game. So that's definitely more impressive high-end production than we've typically had in a lot of years with the Blackhawks. The new addition, Isaac Rosen, has done more than we really could have hoped, quite honestly. Leads the team with 50 points and those 31 assists in 38 games. Kent Johnson, the leader in goals, with 23, 47 points in 37 games. The veteran Dylan Larkin continues to be very productive with 43 points, including 21 goals, 36 games into his season. Rosen and Johnson are our first-line wingers. Larkin is actually our second-line center, where he plays alongside Will Shields, who has 35 points in 35 games, including 23 assists. Our first-line center, Quentin Byfield, has missed a few games with injuries, still has 33 goals in 33 games played. 33 points, in 33 games played. So he's the 5th of our players who's averaging at least 1 point per game. Not quite as flashy in his production as his line mates on the wings, Rosen and Johnson, but certainly doing well. Victor Eklund with 30 points, defenseman Sam Renzel, 28. Third-line center Nathan Villeneuve with 7 goals, 19 assists. Defenseman Quinn Hughes has 26 points. Bocage, 7 goals, 13 assists for 20 points in 36 games. The new defenseman, Simon Nemec, out right now with a tooth that was knocked out, but he's also been productive offensively with 20 points. Defensemen Matteo Rotundi and Roy Chung, not as dynamic offensively, but at plus 17 and plus 20, 2 of the better numbers on the team. Glossed over this, but perhaps not surprisingly, the line mates who are our top 2 scorers, Rosen and Johnson, both plus 23 on the year. Cole Sillinger, we brought him back as a free agent this year. He has not been as productive. He's ended up as our third-line left winger, so he's not getting as much ice time as maybe we would have hoped. Johnson's been the first line, and Eklund is the second line. But there have been times also when we've needed rest from some of our older centers, notably Larkin, and to a lesser extent Byfield, where we've put Sillinger back into his more traditional position as a center on the first or second line, depending on who was banged up and who was worn out. So he's been a jack of all trades for us, although he hasn't been as productive as in previous years. Xavier Veilleux, the defenseman, +8 on the year. Starting now to get into some of the players with less playing time. Linus Eriksson, the rookie, has 10 points, only +1 on the year. Adam Jecka, who's been kind of a fourth-line player for us, center and right wing at times, depending on injuries, 8 points on the year. Luke Coughlin, likely in his final year with the Blackhawks, has played just 13 games for us. Been reasonably productive with 7 points and a +4, but he is definitely our 7th defenseman at this point. Lafreniere, another veteran, 30 years old, not all that productive, typically playing as our fourth-line winger. Similarly, Thomas Vesely, fourth-line center more often than not all that productive. The rookie Julian Mays, -4. Again, just getting into not even quite every other game, but at least picking up a little bit of experience at the NHL level for us this year. And with that quick review done, we will finish up this episode. Looking forward to seeing whether we can continue to play some real good hockey over the next few months as we approach the trade deadline. No obvious holes for the team at this point. Those could certainly emerge in the coming weeks and coming months. Right now, nobody on the injury list. We've had some guys banged up, but they're all back and healthy. And even Nemec is game available now after getting that tooth knocked out. So the team is healthy. The team is playing really well. Don't know that I want to move on from Wallstat, but that could certainly be an option. We'll just take a quick look. Somewhat early stages here, just on January 1st. But not a ton on the trading block at this point, probably because it is a little early. Everyone still, for the most part, probably believes they're in contention. The left defenseman, Ty Smith of the Penguins, looks like one of the top potential players who's on the block, but certainly we could attempt to trade for someone who's not on the block if we decide that's the right thing to do. And given that our goal is not just to win a President's Trophy this year, but hopefully make a long run in the playoffs that ends up with a Stanley Cup, we will be very interested in potentially looking to add some talent over the next couple of months. The limiting factor is that we're only about $500,000 below the cap, so we're only going to be able to make a big trade for someone with a huge salary if their team keeps a good chunk of that salary, and also it'll likely mean that we'll have a relatively expensive player that ends up on the IL, which would not be optimal. But we will find the answers to all of those hypotheticals in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.